And we're live. Hello, friends. Super excited to be here for Office Hours, March 25th. Before I forget, next week needs to be canceled. I have a meeting that just had to happen over the Office Hours time. So yeah, so we're going to take a break from next week. But if you are unfamiliar with Office Hours, this is your opportunity to ask me questions. And so every week, or assuming I don't have a cancellation like next week, we have just an hour where I can answer whatever questions that you've got. You can queue them up in the Discord or join the Zoom, and I give priority to folks who are in the Zoom. So that's it. You can read all about it on my website at the Office Hours URL. So with that said, I think that's all I need to say. So anybody here in the Zoom have a question for me?
Yeah, I had a question. So it's about the React testing library patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the way that I understood the React testing library pattern is that you could do like integration like tests, or you could like do like test workflows. So like, say for example, you can test like that the user can click a button to open a card, fill out the form in the card, click the submit button, and verify that the UI is working through that whole flow. And so I think what the problem that we're sort of seeing in our code base is that as we started to write these tests, we started to see them taking like a really long time, like in CI. And so we're starting to have to increase the test timeout, and it just feels like maybe we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, this is a pretty common question. I see your questions right there. Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts on this and then some suggestions. So for one, when we're talking about test time, when we say, well, this test is taking a long time, well, long time is relative, and it's taking, well, what we're really saying is it's taking longer than than the typical test would take for like the typical kind of test that I write, which is just call a function, verify the output. That test runs really fast. These tests are doing way more and covering a lot more code, running a lot more code. And so you would expect them to take longer to do that. And it's not just doing a bunch of extra stuff for no reason. You actually are getting a lot of confidence out of that. And so for one, like it is, you do expect them to take a little bit longer. They are certainly faster than like pulling up a real browser and everything as well. But still, yeah, they do take a bit of a longer time, and you certainly don't want to have a code base that has a bunch of tests that take like super long time. Having tests take 15 seconds, if you feel like you could actually go through the thing that the test is doing faster than the test is, then that's, or even like a fraction or like if it's only twice as fast as you, then that is a problem. And so there are probably, there are a couple of things that are probably going on, especially in CI. So because even though you are running through a lot more code, it shouldn't be like quite that slow. So, but I thought like it's useful to establish like you are doing a lot more, so it's not going to take the amount of time that it takes to just call a function and assert on the output. So yeah, a couple of reasons this could be. One is, first, let me make sure I understand you are using Jest, is that right, with JS DOM? Yeah. So that's what most people are doing. That's what I have done in the past, and it works nicely. I have noticed though that Jest and JS DOM are quite slow. And that is like probably the main culprit here, is that all of those DOM interactions are going to be pretty slow. And that can be quite frustrating. So I actually recently have been investigating a new DOM emulator library called Happy DOM, which touts itself as being a lot faster than JS DOM. And yeah, the goal is to emulate enough of the web browser useful for testing, scraping, and server rendering. Focus heavily on performance and can be used as an alternative to JS DOM. I'm guessing, yeah, there is a Happy DOM Jest environment. I have not tested this before, but this is something I think would be worthwhile exploring, swapping JS DOM with Happy DOM and seeing if you can make it be a little bit faster. Happy DOM comes out of the box with vtest, or I guess maybe not out of the box, but I am also exploring using vtest for stuff, and that's what we're using for the remix stacks. And what's cool about vtest is that it simulates the same API as Jest, and so there are some differences with instead of doing jest.mock or whatever, or jest.set system time, you're doing VI, and you're normally they want you to import stuff. You can make it be global, but they want you to import stuff. Yeah, so vtest is focused on performance. I think, yeah, so here existing options like Jest were created in a different context. There's a lot of duplication between Jest and Vite, forcing users to configure two different pipelines. Oh, so yeah, like the original motivation behind vtest was, we've got Vite and we want to have testing. We don't want to bring in Jest, which does a lot of the stuff that Vite is doing. So we'll just use Vite under the hood for our testing framework. And Vite is like outrageously fast as well. Largely because it's using ESBuild under the hood for doing its compilation and stuff. So yeah, that would be another thing to investigate, like try switching over to Vite. Like I said, it has a lot of similarities in the API and everything, so you shouldn't have to change a lot of your code. It should be just like something that you can experiment on. But that's in my experience, the biggest bottleneck has been Jest and JS DOM. What's cool about Jest is that it can run a lot of your tests in parallel. vtest can do the same. At least I believe it can. Pretty sure it can. Now that I say that, I'm not actually sure it can, but I would expect that it would. So that'd be something to look into. But that is another reason why your CI tests might be taking a really long time as well. So I've noticed that CI doesn't typically like having tests running in parallel, just because the CI machines are pretty low power. Like they're not very highly spec'd machines, which I don't understand why we do that to ourselves. Let's get some like legit machines to run our CI, but I don't know. So that's another thing that you can look into without having to migrate to a different testing framework. Is Jest has a run and band flag that can be useful, especially for CI. So I should have been linking all of this stuff. Let me grab Happy DOM. Do they have a website or something? I'll link you to, I guess I'll just link you to the GitHub and vtest. But yeah, the run and band flag can help in the CI situations, because then it doesn't run all in parallel. It just runs one test at a time. And CI tends to like that a lot, a fair bit more. I just noticed they have the CI flag. Oh yeah, that's right. I knew about that. It's not relevant. Yeah, so those are the things that I would look at. Another thing that you could consider is switching to a different test runner for some of those tests, specifically like run in a real browser with Cypress. Because a real browser, the DOM operations are faster. Yeah, but then you have to like pull up a real browser and everything too. So that like there's some trade-offs there. For me personally, I would try to keep it in Jest. I would investigate switching to vtest and see if that makes it faster. I would investigate using Happy DOM and see if that makes that faster. And then I would test out the run and band option with Jest. So those are the things I would do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for responding.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck. It's
Thanks.
frustrating to have tests run slow, but do remember, like, you are getting a lot more value out of those tests than just like what you may be typically used to just like calling a function. So
Yeah, I definitely see the value. It's just a little bit of concern how it's, they're taking a little bit longer. So
yeah, yep. Cool. Anybody, do you have any other questions?
no, that was it. That was it. That's
You pronounce your name Uriel?
Uriel or Uriel. Yeah.
Uriel. Okay, cool. Cool. Anybody else here in the Zoom have a question?
Yeah. Hey, Kent. Appreciate everything you do. I'm Logan. You answered something last week for me, but I didn't have a fully fledged out example to kind of get my point across. So I
Yeah.
was able to recreate that. And I think I have the first question answered because I found your implementation detail post. And I also found from your testing JavaScript course exactly my case, but it was in Redux where you were able to expose the Redux store to test if they need it. So I found a way to do that with context. So I have the code sandbox again if you'd like to look at it. So I'm curious if you think the solution that I did for that uh, was okay. And then the second part again, it's all in text. There is we're doing a big context thing, and the initial value properties come from hooks and stuff. So there's no props passed in, there's no like functions to be able to override that initial state in our jest test. So that was my question too. And during the week, I found a solution where um, basically you just do identity function and then you can mock the identity function and spread your extra stuff on top of that. So it'd be great for you to, or I would love for you to look into that and maybe receive some
Yeah.
feedback on those solutions.
Yeah. So is it this code sandbox still the same one? Oh, you
Yeah,
muted yourself. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
yeah. So this file is like the ultimate one where I basically have my solution, and I have like the eyes here with all the exclamation marks for the really important points.
Got it. Okay. Cool. So you've got the render with counter provider, RTL options, UI. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And so in this case, you actually don't expose a mechanism for setting what that initial state is. You just say render it, and then you interact with things. But then you've got the counter state. Oh, I see. Yeah. I really don't like making assertions on state unless what you're testing is the thing that you're testing is a hook. If that's what you're testing, then that is okay because the state value is part of the API. Like, so when you're testing a hook, or when you're testing anything, actually, here's another blog post that will be useful. Let's see, test user. You have two users, and sometimes a third user can slip in, and that we call the test user. And so your two users are the developer and the end user. And so and then the third user is the test user. So the developer is going to be, in the case of a hook, they're going to be calling the hook, passing prompts, getting a return result, like a return value. The end user is end user doesn't really get involved too much with hooks unless you're like updating the document title or something like that, or doing some DOM thing, or maybe event handlers maybe. But yeah, so typically the hooks are mostly interested in the developer user. And so that's where you're saying, okay, I'm passing back some state. The developer user actually cares about that state. So I'm going to make assertions on that. For the end user, or for a component, the end user is going to be clicking on buttons and things. The developer user is literally just rendering and just passing props, and that's all. And so if your tests do any more than those things, then you've introduced the test user who starts caring and doing things, caring about and doing things that neither one of those users care anything about. And so why this distinction matters is each for all three of these use cases or these users, they can be broken by something that you do, like by a change that you make. You don't want to break the developer user because then you've got a breaking change. You don't want to break the end user because like the app needs to work. But who cares if you break the test user? Just the test cares. And so now the test suddenly exists for itself. And so that's why implementation detail testing is such a bad thing. It's because it's busy work. So anyway, that's why when I see an assertion on state, I'm starting to think, ooh, I don't think so. So what we're doing here is we've got this component. That's what we're trying to test, and we want to verify that this my counter is going to render out the right counter, and that's what you're doing right here, and that's covering the end user case. This is the end user case as well. This is the developer user. The developer user renders it. This is the test user right here. So the developer doesn't actually care what the state is. The end user doesn't care what the state is. Only the test cares what the state is. Right, because what that state is actually implementation detail. So long as the current count is 1 gets rendered to the output, then the end user is satisfied. So long as I can render this component with whatever props, the developer user is satisfied as well. So adding an additional assertion that says, here's what the state is unnecessary and makes your test more finicky, because now I can come in here and change some of the implementation of how these different components work and break my test. And that's just busy work. So that's one thing that I would avoid. Now, like with everything, especially with testing, there's always like different like use cases and things. So you're always working with the constraints and trade-offs and things. But this is one thing that I would strongly avoid. But everything else about this test looks totally cool. That's totally fine. I just would get rid of the counter state and get rid of both of these assertions. You're covered with just that.
So with the second test there, we're trying to. Well, I was thinking, in some cases at my work, we don't show things in the UI. So that's what my line 92 is saying. What if something isn't in the UI? How would we test that if it's in context? I don't really know.
Yeah. Okay. So in this example, the end user and the developer user don't actually care about that. Like it doesn't matter what the last function that was called, as long as the UI is correct, then it shouldn't matter. However, there are definitely situations where the developer user can't tell and the end user can't tell what's going on, but what's happening is important. And so, can you give me? Well, I'll just give you an example that's in my mind, and maybe it'll help answer your question or your situation. So one example of this would be firing off analytics. So the user clicks on the thing, some state gets updated, maybe the UI gets updated, maybe not. A network request is sent to handle analytics for that. In that situation, then you're making a network call, and you can mock that out with MSW, and you can verify that that the network call was actually made. But yeah, so there are definitely some situations where you are going to mock something and verify that the mock was called correctly. But this isn't one of them, I guess, is all I'm saying. Yeah, I realize it is contrived though. So
yeah, no, it's totally fine. Cause and maybe I'm over testing is what you're saying, because we have like a customization thing happening where you can like reorder things. And I was wanting to make sure that is in the right shape. And that would be testing the dev code, nothing the user sees. And then, yeah, that does get passed to an API. But like, again, maybe I'm over testing. But I'm just trying to make sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So if the order changes, is that at all observable to the user?
In that case, yes. But there are times where it's more than, well, I guess, yeah. And in this case, as we talk about it more, I mean, I do see how it's just like, well, I guess you don't need to test that.
Yeah, I guess think about like how could this break? And Yeah, and how would the user know that it broke? And then go and do the thing that could make it break, and assert on the thing that the user would have been able to tell that it broke, I guess, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But like I said, like all of testing is you're going up and down trade-offs and just deciding, is I guess just keep in mind that test user. And when you're doing something that's testing implementation details, you're like, here's the test user again. Have an answer for it. So why are we making an exception in this case? And can we avoid that? So yeah, because there are definitely sometimes that something happens that is not observable to the user or the developer, and that's when you bring in the test user to make an assertion on that.
Cool. I appreciate that. And then, yeah, the other one was kind of the third test here, but you won't see the solution until you go into the solutions folder. And then I think it's Q2 solution, if you could open
Okay.
that file. But you'll see that I'm basically just using an identity in that Q2, the Q2 solution that's not the test. Sorry, I named them really bad.
Oh, so where am I going? Oh,
So
got
just
it.
one
Got it.
file below. Yeah. So it's just doing an identity so that it works normally,
Okay. So
and
what
then it becomes
you're
mockable.
mocking out this piece. I see.
Yeah,
Oh, so the only reason that you have this at all is so that it can be mocked.
that's exactly right. Because in my previous one, I was last week I was passing a prop that was just only, if you remember that, and it was like, this is horrible. This feels so bad. I don't want just a just only prop. So this is what I came up with, and I feel like it works great. So and again, the point here is, my real example is these values inside of this context value here come from hooks and other things, right? They're not coming from props. So this is what I came up with. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So these values are those hooks that you can mock?
I could, but there's quite a bit, and sometimes
Mm.
they're not hooks. So there are things that are in this provider here, just like there's actually like, yeah, I did that at line 13 or line 16 are defined in the component. So what if I want
Mm.
to overwrite those? And that's where this identity allows me to do that as well.
I see. Yeah. So the issue here is that your test can do things that are impossible in your actual app, right? So I could set another random value to a number, or literally anything. This is like um, a static value. So it's in the app, it's impossible for this to be anything, but in my test, I can make it be anything else. And so whenever, and like, of course, like you'd say, well, I just wouldn't do that. But
We're
when
using
you,
TypeScript, I'll say that too, so that
yeah,
helps.
yeah,
But
and that can help for sure. So you wouldn't be able to set it to like a number or something.
mhm.
But whenever your test, you enable your test to be able to do something that could never possibly happen in the app, then that's dangerous territory there, because then your test, again, it only exists for itself. The only one who cares about this particular state is just the test. So I've never seen anybody do things this way, and I would really recommend against doing things that way. What so what you're really interested in is we need to get this context value to be in a particular state, and getting it into that state is something that the user can do. Otherwise, if the user can't do that, then you're like, why are you testing that? So it's got to be something that is capable for the user to do. Now you make your test do the same thing that the user would do to get it into that state. That's the primary goal there. And so like sometimes if like what it takes for the user to do that requires like a ton of steps or something like that, then I can see where this would be really attractive. It's like, well, I've got to click this button like 100 times to get it into that state in the first place. Okay, and maybe we can allow that. Again, it's all just trade-offs. But that should be your first instinct is the user can get it into this state. So I'll just make my test do what the user does to get it into that state. And that gives you a lot more confidence. rather than doing this identity function, if you decide like, no, we've just got to do it this way, it takes too much like mocking or like global setup or whatever to get it into the state that I need it to, then what I would do is I would accept a value. And then you'd say value or the context value. Well, and in fact, what I typically do for context providers in this case is I just say props, and then I'll just spread the props. Yeah, and I guess that'd be value, context, value, and then spread the props. And then I can override the value that way. That's how I would write it. So
Okay.
I wouldn't use the mock function there. That now I guess I could see. No, this is how I'd do it. I would get rid of the mock identity function.
So yeah, you made a good point because I think what I am trying to do is that I'm trying to avoid mocking a bunch of stuff because this just allows me to. I'm basically short circuiting that, and it makes
Yeah.
it easier on me. And the code works exactly the same as if I would have mocked it. I guess I'm just giving myself a short circuit way. So it does work. I mean, I've been using it a lot in case you were like, yeah, use it, but you're kind of like, eh. So I think that's all I'm trying to do is shortcut the mocking in a way, just so these tests can be more simple than having a bunch of mocks.
Yeah. Yeah, you just got to keep in mind that whenever you mock, it's like you're poking a hole in reality and you've got to do something to patch up that hole. So you should have at least one test that doesn't do any of the mocking. Because if you go into your provider right now and make like a major change to the way that some of those values are created, like for example, if I go like this, that totally breaks the app, but it doesn't break your tests, right? And so you want to make sure that you have at least one test that makes sure that like without mocking anything, it does work. And now the rest of my tests, we're going to make these easy so I don't have to do all that, a bunch of mocking and stuff. Yeah, I think with considering that you've already done a lot of work on this, with this mocking function, it's not a huge deal. Just keep in mind you're mocking something, got to make sure you patch that hole up somehow. And a value prop is no better in that regard. Like it's basically exactly the same. So if you're happy with this in either case, I mean, if you accept props and then forward them along like this, it doesn't look like you're doing anything fancy just for tests. It just looks like you're taking a shortcut to not have to do the children prop thing. Whereas this, it's very intrusive, like we're doing this just for tests. So that's like one point, I guess, for doing things the way that I typically do. But from like a foundational standpoint, they're basically the same. And so just choose the one that you dislike the least.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. And I thought about the whole value thing, but then, I'd have to have I was imagining again these values come from hooks and all that sort of thing, custom hooks. And I felt trying to create that value was going to be tough in tests. But anyways, I won't take up more of your time. I appreciate it. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else in Zoom have a question before I go over to Discord? Okay, cool. Then I'm going to go to the Discord. Coming up, we actually got quite a queue of questions for this one. So, yep, we got to Logan's question. Marcos. Hello, Marcos. Let me say answering this now. Long time no see. It has been a while. Hope your family's doing awesome as well. Wondering what we're missing in comparison to your Simply React talk. So here's my Simply React talk. And this is a little implementation of an accordion. Is it the combined reducer implementation where we differ, or am I missing something else obvious? Okay, so we've got sweet, and then only one, and then preventing close. And now I can close and then combine. Only one, it can be opened at a time, and you can, and that's the problem that you're facing. Okay, so I'm pretty sure in the Simply React talk, I do show the URL for the demo. So that's what I'm going to try and find, because yeah, I can't remember. I guess I don't. Nope, I don't. Okay, let me see if I can find this, because I think it'll be useful for you after. So we're looking for React. Here, actually, simply React. There we go. We've got slides, and the slides are gonna be. These were some of the cooler slides I've ever made, because like they were interactive and stuff. It was super cool. It was hard though to make that. I can't do this and make it look responsive and stuff. So it was like a real pain. Okay, so here is my implementation. Let me give that to you. And my lib for, oh, actually, no, it was implemented in here. Combined reducers. So what I'll look at what yours is doing here in a second. I'm just refreshing my own memory. So my combined reducers takes all the reducers, returns a function that accepts the state and the action, so a reducer. And for each reducer of the reducers, I call the reducer with the state and the action and get a result. And if there is a result, then I return that result. And so then for the tabs UI, I'm calling use tabs. That is use accordion with combined reducers, which takes the reducer they provided, prevent close, single reducer, and accordion reducer. So prevent close is going to say, hey, if the action type, if what they're doing is trying to toggle, and let's see, and the one they're trying to toggle is the last one open, then don't let them do that. Otherwise, don't do anything. The single reducer is going to say if they're trying to toggle, and the currently open indexes includes the one that we're trying to close, or let's see, and we're not closing. Yeah, and we're not closing. Then just return the new one that we're trying to open. So normally it would return the new one that we're trying to open as well as all the other ones. We're just going to return the new one that they're opening, so that so only one can be open at a time. Okay, so let's take a look at what yours is doing. So you've got negate and match combine reducers, and you're doing reduce. Yeah, so what you're doing is you're calling all of them. And what I'm doing is I'm calling each one until one of them returns something. And so if I were to change this to be more like mine, I would say, yeah, let's see. Say result. Yeah, actually, I don't know if you could do this and reduce. Yeah, actually, sure you can. So we'll say null. New state, and if result, or here, actually we'll say if new state and return new state, and then this can actually just return, and then this will be state. There you go. I don't know if this is going to work with your implementation. Yeah, it doesn't look like it works with your implementation of your other stuff, but that's how my combined reducers works. I think that I'm pretty sure that's the same thing. So then if we look at your accordion, see if we can just fix this. You've got to prevent close. Yeah, so the default should return, should do nothing. There we go. Single, prevent close. Oh, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, so what's going on is we're using the reducer, default reducer. And then you've got your app. Yeah, so I guess with the way that you have it implemented, we'll want to take, yeah, probably, like I'm trying to change as little as possible. But what we're going to need is a combined reducers with the reducer and the default reducer at the end. And I'm pretty sure this will make it work. Whether this is the way I would do it, probably not. But this makes it work with the way that you've got it implemented. I would implement it like this. So anyway, a fun little code golf there. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Good luck. Okay, great. By the way, if you're in the Zoom call and you have a question, you can feel free to interrupt me at any time. That's what you get for showing up. Frank, I'm going to go with that. Feel free to correct me. Thanks for taking time to respond to my question here. It's going to be about TS and React Router. At work, we use React Router version 6. Congratulations. Good for you. That's awesome. And we have a main sub URL where 80% of our app and pages are under it. So my param, all the pages. I use const my param, use params almost everywhere under it. And since we are in these pages under my param is for sure in the URL, right? If not, the component would not be rendered in the page. But my param is of type string or undefined. I think I understand why. But everywhere I need it, I must use like this, my param not, or bang, or whatever that thing's called. Is that okay? Should I test it even if it doesn't make sense? Or maybe I'm wrong if it does. I was thinking of making a custom hook for this param since almost all of our app is under it. Something like use my param and then, yeah. So you just like hide that away somewhere else. That's actually close to what I would do. So the fact is that TypeScript is not wrong. There is no guarantee from at compile time that my param will exist. So use params returns a record of string keys with string or undefined as the values. And that is all TypeScript can guarantee for you, because you could very easily go up to your router and change what my param is called. You can change it to anything. And TypeScript just isn't smart enough to know that that's the way that the router works. Maybe one day, but not today. So, and I imagine like some people could probably put together like a TypeScript types generator or something that's generated based on your route config or something. I think somebody's done this for Remix, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, personally, what I would do is something similar to this, except instead of returning my param not, I would say, I would add, I need code somewhere. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I would say, here's my function, use my param, and I'd get my param from use params like you're doing, but then I'd say, if not my param, then throw a new error. My param is missing. This should never happen. And then return my param. That way, when there's an error, you get something like, you get a nice error message that explains what's going on, rather than cannot call to uppercase of undefined. That is less helpful. So yeah, you have the right idea. Just give yourself a little bit of more useful error message. And just answered this. Okay, cool. Shaheen, hopefully I said that right. Thank you for helping out. My question is about your React performance workshop, react.memo. And here's what we're looking at, the list item. Okay, in app component, we pass down items array to menu component and loop through the array and pass each item object to the list item component. Normally, I would expect all memoized list item components to re-render on, hover, or highlight, because we're passing an object as a prop to list item. However, it just magically works. I would love to confirm if this is because of all items slice 0 to 100, since slice method returns a shallow copy of the portion of an array into a new array object selected. In other words, although we are passing different item array instance as a prop, it consists of the same instances of item objects in every render. So we are passing the same item object to list item every time. Did I get it right? Yes, you're right. That's exactly what's going on. I need to say no more. Just answered Yes, you're right. That's exactly what's going on. So the array changes every time, but each item in the array is the same every time. And that we can just see where the items come from. Yeah, it's the all items. We're using use async. We get the data, and that data does not change over these different renders. We are slicing, just grabbing the first 100, but those items stay consistent. Okay. James, have you used React 3 Fiber? What are your thoughts on it? I am super impressed by all the demos, but no, I have not used React 3 Fiber personally. I was going to possibly use React 3 Fiber on my website for like all of these really neat illustrations at the top of all these pages. I was going to make it so that as you move around, it like goes in 3D, or maybe it slowly spins or something. But the designer never gave us the 3D. Well, they did, but it wasn't suited for that, the way they did it, or the illustrator. And I didn't have time. And Jay actually put together a PR for this to make this have like a kind of interesting movement as you move the mouse. But I didn't like 100% really like the way that it looked. And I thought it would just be more distracting than anything. And there were like performance things that I was worried about too. So I never did it, but yeah, super impressed by demos and stuff. It just blows my mind that the browser can do that, but yeah, it's not something I'm doing. Benjamin, hey Kent, super excited about the recent post remixing React Router. Yeah, it's so cool. Recently came like people, if you're not freaking out about this, then you don't understand it. It is huge, huge, huge. Yeah, and I actually posted about something related to this just today, the remix, the Yang to React's Yin. And so if you haven't read this yet, go ahead and give that a read, especially if you're on Team Blue, because it looks like Team Red is like right behind us. You know what's cool is that's 259 people who actually read the blog post, not just like who showed up on the page, but went through the 11 minutes or so to get through the whole thing. And I just think that is cool. Like when we go to here and we say my 190 blog posts have been read hundreds of thousands of times by 100 and almost 50,000 people. That's like actual reads of like, I went through the whole thing. And this is going to switch to an actual number. I think when we hit 500,000, I didn't want to, like when I initially released my my site, I didn't want it to say it's been read 10 times by 5 people, you know, because like I'd only started tracking and I'm like, no, my blog posts have been read hundreds of thousands of times by hundreds of thousands of people. And so I made my site say, if it's less than like 500,000, I think, then just say hundreds of thousands. But I think right now the total here, actually, we can see the total. The actual total right now is 220,000, which like still blows my mind. That is so cool. Yeah, it's pretty rad. Anyway, that is like big diversion to what the question was. But yes. Anyway, I haven't even gotten to the question. Came across a late 2021 post from Michael Jackson regarding the maintenance of React Router Native. Long story short, it seems React Native is not a priority at the moment. This is correct. It is not a priority at all for us right now, which I can understand. Would that mean this last announcement only concern web app first? I believe that's the case. I'm not personally working on the router, but I am pretty sure we are not thinking about native at all right now. Maybe one day, but yeah, I don't think it's relevant to the native right now. Be super interested to get the same Remix DX UX with React Native. Any insider point of view? Yeah, sorry, that's where we're at. I'm pretty confident we are not doing anything with React Native right now. I realize that it could be disappointing, but no, we're focused on web, and I've never done any React Native stuff. Native for some reason just never caught my attention. Okay, human. As with anything, mocking is a form of abstraction, has trade-offs just like values league. Oh, I think this is a comment on what we were doing earlier. Yeah. Okay, cool. I don't think that's a question, more of a comment. Neat. That is we're about up on our time. Oh, I just noticed a chat in Zoom. Okay, yeah, that was just a thank you. See you. So I will wrap things up, and feel free to throw in a last message here, or jump in on Zoom if you do have something you want to say. Let's come back to office hours. So like I said, next week is actually canceled. I don't think I put it on here, but I will hopefully put it on here. Here, let me show you what it takes to put something on my site. I go to office hours MDX file. I come over here, and this is, what is that? Well, it's April 1st. I hit save, commit. April 1st is canceled. And actually, may as well get rid of all these. I think I spelled cancel wrong. You don't have to spell it right in the commit message, turns out, I decided. Oh, right, and I had some pull requests that emerged. So get push and get browse. Gotta spell that right, or that doesn't work. Okay, cool. And now we go to my actions, and we'll look at refresh content. And refresh content when it finally starts. Hopefully GitHub doesn't have an outage. Boom, it's done. Office hours has been updated. We refresh, and boom, it's updated. Isn't that cool? I didn't have to deploy or anything. Yeah, that's so awesome. Okay, anyway, Mateo just asked, any tips when hiring people? Hiring is really tough. My favorite take on this is from Seldo, or Laurie Voss, hiring, you suck at technical interviews, I think is, I don't normally use that word. My kids would be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe Dad used that word. But yeah, this is a really great take on hiring and interviewing. So go give that a read. Hiring is tough. But when I was at PayPal, the way that I would hire, I would typically just say, like we just talk about the stuff that they had done, talk about like what they want in their career, and then I would ask them, what are you really, really good at? I want to see your technical prowess as well. And so instead of testing them on the things that I was good at, I would ask them, what are you really good at? And then let them show off to me, and try my very best to make the hiring environment a friendly one, so that they weren't intimidated by it, because that is like, it's intimidating. But yeah, that ended up working out pretty well. There was one person that we hired that I said we should not, and they ended up not being a great hire. So I was vindicated. And then a bunch of people that I said we should hire, and they ended up being awesome. And a lot of it was just, that's how I interviewed. So good luck with that. Okay, cool. Let me just double check this. Looks like we're good. So I will see you all in 2 weeks, and hope you